Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and I was rather surprised about how many people asked about TCAS on the video of the Japan Airlines A350 accident at Tokyo Haneda Airport, where it crashed into a -8-300 on the runway. Therefore, let's take a little bit of time today to find out how TCAS works close to the ground and why TCAS is not the solution to possible ground collision threats. Now, we're going to start with a very simple look. I'm standing here in a Boeing 737 and we are on 3-4 right at Haneda Airport. So let's just move inside. You can see I've set my navigation display range to 10 nautical miles, which is the minimum that you can select on Airbus aircraft, and I've entered the runway into my FMS over here with an approach to runway 3-4 right entered. So let's now go ahead and press the TCAS test button. So got that one right down here. And now have a look at the size of the symbols here. Remember, the runway symbol itself is already much bigger than the actual runway, but now just look at the size of those TCAS targets. You can already easily get that it is impossible to determine whether such a target, if it would be showing at all, would be on the runway or next to the runway. Now, that is quite natural. We need to think about how TCAS works exactly. Now, in order to understand a little bit more about that, let's have a quick look into some of the figures we can find from Airbus, from the FCOM. Now, obviously, I cannot publish Airbus FCOM material here. However, luckily, the colleagues from Simple Flying did exactly that. So we do have the original Airbus FCOM graphics available. I'm going to link the article in the video description below, as it describes in a very good level of detail exactly how TCAS works. Now, let's start with having a look at the figure we see on screen right over here. Now, this is the different areas where traffic can be found, and if we go a little bit further down, then we can see roundabout at which position, or rather closure rate, things do become relevant. So the resolution advisory zone is the one where you've got 25 seconds to the possible impact. The traffic advisory is 40 seconds. And the proximate traffic is aircraft closer than 6 nautical miles laterally and 1,200 feet vertically. So these are the zones that TCAS is made for. Now, thinking about the speed of an airplane, even if we are just going, let's say, 120 knots, then that equals 2 nautical miles per minute, and 25 seconds is roughly 1 nautical mile. So that gives you an idea of what the closest, the resolution advisory zone of the TCAS is made for. We're talking approximately 1 nautical mile over here at very slow speeds. Obviously it's getting bigger as your speed increases. If you're doing, let's say, 300 nautical miles, then you do 5 miles a minute, so we are talking 2.5 miles, and so on. That's how you can scale that one up. Also, obviously, the speed of the possible intruder matters as well. However, for what we are looking into today, it shall not play too much of a role. Okay, so from here on, that gives us an idea of the sizes for which TCAS is built, for the distances for which TCAS is built. Now, as we can already guess from those distances, TCAS is a tool for collision avoidance in the air. Now that becomes a lot more obvious when we have a look at a document here from Eurocontrol talking about the principles of TCAS operation at low altitude. And note how over here they don't even call it TCAS, they call it ACAS. Now ACAS is the term used on the level of the aviation authorities and air traffic control, and stands for Airborne Collision Avoidance System, with the emphasis here being on airborne, because TCAS is not made for ground operation. Now let's have a very quick look into how TCAS works on the way down. We already see a very good graphic over here from Eurocontrol, but let's just have a look at the Simple Flying article, where they do have the original Airbus FCOM graphic, which is quite useful in this situation. And this is the one I'm talking about. So TCAS inhibitions, and this is where it really becomes important now. So, in the climb, you can see that at low altitudes below 600 AGL, all traffic advisories are inhibited. And then later on, resolution advisories inhibited until 1100 feet, descent arrays 1200 feet, and increased descent arrays until 1650 feet. On the descent, we have the opposite. The increased descent array is inhibited from 1450 feet above ground, then the descent array from 1000, all resolution advisories inhibited from 900, and all traffic advisories inhibited from 400 feet. Now, those altitudes are chosen based on where you could realistically expect a pilot to act on those advisories, or be it traffic or resolution advisories. Now, let's take a couple simple examples. At 1000 feet AGL, descent arrays get inhibited. This is obviously because pilots do tend to react rather strongly on TCAS when they do actually get a resolution advisory. And at just 1000 AGL, if a pilot pushes 2000 or 2500 feet per minute, obviously that is not going to end very well, ending up in a high rate of descent. And we have to always keep in mind that TCAS advisories will always be overridden by ground proximity advisories, since they pose the greater threat. Therefore, a resolution advisory leading to a steep descent at 1000 feet would almost immediately be overridden by the GPWS, and thereby the airplane would start to climb again, and that would kind of make the entire idea of the TCAS obsolete. Now, from 900 feet, all resolution advisories are inhibited, and from 400 feet, all traffic advisories. Now, why is that? And this is the key point as to why TCAS could not prevent the Japan Airlines accident. Now, I already said that TCAS is built for rather large distances. Now, aircraft standing at the runway don't fall into that category, and they are typically completely filtered out by TCAS. Now, it is correct that an airplane lining up on the runway should turn on that transponder, but think about that. You've got an airplane standing at a holding point. That airplane is now cleared to line up behind a landing airplane. Obviously, as soon as the landing airplane passes, the pilots are going to turn on the transponder, maybe even before that, and that would lead to traffic advisories and resolution advisories for the landing airplane. Overall, in some countries of the world, think United States of America and others, it is even normal to turn the transponder into mode Charlie or mode Sierra on the ground already, thereby also transmitting altitude information on top of just the position information that is commonly used in the rest of the world, think TCA or transponder mode Alpha. And that would obviously show dozens of TCAS targets on the navigation displays of all the aircraft approaching and departing. And since that is unwanted, since you really only want to see those targets that you've got in the air, TCAS is simply going to filter out any aircraft on the ground. Now, for flight simulations especially, there is a slight misconception about the accuracy of TCAS. So, when we just press that test button here again and have a look at the size of our TCAS targets, then you can see that they are rather big. They are much larger than actual aircraft are, otherwise you would barely see them on the screen, if at all. Now, what's important to understand over here is that in flight simulators, TCAS is a lot more accurate than it is in real world. In the real world, when you've got a TCAS target in front of you, then it might be slightly jumping from slightly right of track, slightly left of track, slightly right of track again, maybe a little bit more right of track, then all of a sudden it's a mile to your left. Because that is the level of accuracy in which the TCAS system is able to determine the position of the other aircraft. So, in Flight Simulator, I know that the traffic symbols are always very accurate. In the real world, that is not so much the case. They do have a little inaccuracy there, which makes it impossible to determine if an airplane is located on the runway or if it's located at the holding point. Now, don't be mistaken though, even though TCAS, which is an airborne collision avoidance system, is not able to detect aircraft on the runway, there are systems installed at airports which have that very one job. Now, we don't know what happened with that system at Tokyo Haneda Airport. We don't know why it didn't alert air traffic control to the possible collision threat, but just some general information here on how those systems work. Basically, they do send out radio waves along the runway, and those waves are set to a certain height. Let's say, just for example, I'm not sure if that's an accurate value, but let's say that they are going to show you everything that's taller than 1.5 meters. That would still make cars and obviously aircraft trigger the system. However, for example, animals would not trigger the system. That is rather important because you do have smaller animals like rabbits or foxes and you name it cross runways every now and then, and in many cases it's safer for the airplane to continue for a landing, and it's also safer for the air traffic controller operating the system if they don't get false alerts all the time, which would reduce the controller's alertness to a trigger of the system, so that in case it triggers, you know there is something really large and dangerous on the runway, and then controllers can react immediately without the need to first start looking at the runway and search for the fox or whatever it is to determine, you know, if it's a rabbit, then doesn't matter, let the plane land. If it's a fox, think about it, you know? No. That's how the system is set up, and that's how it works. So, ground collision avoidance systems do exist in airports, and it is normally for air traffic controllers to operate them. Pilots don't get any indication of this, and let's be honest over here. A pilot in the very last phase of the landing where things would start to matter on such a system. If we just imagine for a moment that TCAS would be able to show aircraft precisely, that would mean, on very short final, a pilot would have to look extensively inside the cockpit in order to find out if there is a target standing at the holding point or if the target is on the runway. And that is not what pilots do. Pilots look outside. Now, at night, looking into all the lights, we already talked about that in the previous video on the Japan Airlines accidents, so I'm not going to go into much detail, but at night it is very hard to sometimes detect black objects like aircraft at night on a runway that's got very bright lights. But that's all for the investigators of the Japan Airlines accident to investigate now. The key point of this video is many flight simmers seem to believe that TCAS could warn you at low altitude and possible low altitude conflicts. The answer is it cannot reliably do that. And finally, to close up this video, I'm going to link the article of Simple Flying featuring the detailed system explanation, and I'm also going to link the Eurocontrol article that we got up here in the video description below, which I can really recommend you to check out, because they do have a couple of very enlightening examples over here of events that have actually happened where TCAS played a major role close to the ground, and where pilots have either not reacted on it or not understood exactly how it worked, which led to conflicting situations, but also examples of how pilots did react to it and how things were really improved by TCAS. So that's going to be it for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you enjoyed it. If you did, do let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much, everyone, and if you did like the video, be sure to like it in YouTube as well, as it does help out the channel. Thank you very much for watching. I see you all again on the next one, and if you really like what I'm doing over here, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and see you all again on the next one.